What if I told you that the single most powerful predictor when it comes to your child's IQ, their emotional regulation, their anxiety levels, their ability to focus in school life wasn't genetics, it wasn't the school, and it wasn't even the parenting strategies that you're using right now? What if it lived in their diaper? Now, I'm not being dramatic here. I'm being very scientifically precise. And in the next 20 to 25 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the research that has been truly fundamentally changed the way I look at every single child who walks in our office and in our practice. I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dr. Vic Manzo. For those who don't know, I'm a neurofocused pediatric chiropractor. And this is where we go deep, deep, deep into where neuroscience is going to meet the real world for healing for the children you love most. So in today's episode, the second brain in the diaper. Now, how the infant microbiome dictates future IQ and emotional regulation. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to never look at a colicky baby, a tantrum-prone toddler, or even a child who struggles in school the same way ever again. So let's get into this. So there's really two brains, one body. And this is where this discovery kind of has changed a lot in many different things. When you think of like the brain as a neurological master control, right? The brain, nervous system, spinal cord, it's a master controller of everything in the body. This is why, from a chiropractic perspective, I always tell people, go chiropractic first, because you want to make sure if you're looking at a system and you have something showing up, you want to figure out if the control systems are working well first. You want to get there. And then you can look at other things too on the top of it. So it's a whole entire system, especially the brains, right? It's in your skull, right? The whole nervous system, the most important organ in the entire body, in some degrees, I should change that and say the most sensitive, is encased in bone, your brain and your spinal cord, right? But one of the most interesting discoveries that has come out in the last 30 years in neuroscience is that you have a second brain, and that lives in your gut. Now, it's not new. It's gotten out there in the last 5 to 10 years, but this is known as the enteric nervous system. That's the technical term. It contains over 500 million neurons. Okay, I want to say it again. 100 million neurons. Your spinal cord has only about 100 million, okay? Your gut has more nerve cells than your entire spinal column. That's pretty deep there. Now, here's where it gets kind of like remarkable for infants, specifically. At birth, the gut is almost sterile. It's a blank canvas. Within hours of being born, the microbes are starting to colonize it. If you go through a vaginal birth, that is the first layer of probiotics being put into the gut. Okay. This condition is under which they thrive. They're going to perish. It all determines, right? And what's cool, this is why chiropractic, again, right? Control of everything. The nervous system also helps to tell it where it needs to go. Here's your house. This is where you're going to live. Okay. This is why chiropractic is such important. But the programming and how that second brain communicates with the first one is literally determined by how this bacteria is going to thrive or not. So this is not a metaphor. This is not something that's like, just wellness fluff. There's researchers in institutions like Harvard, the Karolinska Institute, the University of College Cork are publishing top tier journals like Nature, Cell, and Neuron. So they're sharing this. This is journal. It's published. This is research that's out there that supports a lot of this. We know that the gut and the brain communicate with another, known as the gut-brain axis. A lot of this happens in the vagus nerve. The majority of that happens. And then we have studies to go further, to show how when you look at someone who has like Parkinson's, the Lewy bodies that happen in the brain, they found out it actually starts in the gut first. So there's a lot here. It goes two ways. So whenever I work with like an ADHD kiddo, and we're going to get into a lot of the science and neuroscience and all this stuff, you have to focus gut and brain, because the gut can fire up the brain can fire the gut. And so they work with each other. Okay. Now, as I said, this highways from the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is critical for pretty much all health in humans. It is the nerve that focuses on immune system, has immunomodulating functions, fancy word for helps control and work with the immune system. It also plays effect on hormones. It also has a family of molecules called short chain fatty acids. And so with this, the infant microbiome, the collection of bacteria, the collection of viruses, the collection of fungi living in that little gut is the operator controller of that highway. It influences and affects it and affects the brain in so many ways. Okay, so let's get into then a little bit more about the microbiome of the baby. So we can kind of dive deep into this to just really understand how the gut plays a huge role. So before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about the vagus nerve so we can dive a little deeper into this element so we can understand how important this vagus nerve is. Because I really want to hammer the vagus nerve on this because it is the most critical part. And in my practice, I talk about something I call it the brake pedal. It's the parasympathetic nervous system, about 70 to 80% of it. Sometimes people even say even higher, but around 75, 80% of that brake pedal system is based upon the vagus nerve. Okay, it's the longest cranial nerve in the body. It goes from the brain and it comes off and it goes all the way down to the male's top of the prostate or the top of the bladder of a woman. So that's a very, very long nerve, okay? And it's known as the 10th cranial nerve. And so about 80 to 90% of the signals traveling on the vagus nerve go from the gut up to the brain, not the other way around, okay? So your baby's gut is constantly sending reports upstairs. It's constantly saying, what kind of environment is this? Are we safe? Are we stressed? Are we nourished? And as the microbiome is writing those reports. I want you to understand the microbiome is so intelligent. It is literally telling your brain what's going on in the environment from a bacterial perspective, from a microbiome perspective. Because when we're eating things, what's in the systems, what's in all that, it is playing a role on all these different things to let itself know where is it at. It's one of the ways the brain knows, because the brain needs to know everything it possibly can so it can orchestrate and help you thrive in every situation in every single part of your environment. Okay, very, very powerful stuff here. So when we do have a very healthy, a very diverse microbiome, it's going to produce things like neurotransmitters. 80%, give or take, some say 90, of serotonin is found, or at least I should say the precursors of serotonin is found in the gut. Okay, this includes things like GABA. GABA is a type of a neurotransmitter that it diminishes the excitatory neurons in the brain, helps it calm. This is the brain's most primary calming chemical. All right. And it's also, like I said, precursor to the serotonin. So about 90 to 95%, actually, here's the research on this, that the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain. Serotonin influences things like mood, emotional regulation, and also sleep. And in a developing infant, this is actively sculpting neural circuits. Okay, this is critical. So we're just talking serotonin here. And I want to just kind of slow this down a little bit. I know I'm probably hammering a lot right now, but let me say that again because I want this to land. I want you guys to really grasp how powerful this is. The bacteria in your baby's gut are helping to build the brain. They're not just passengers, they are the architects. This is critical. So when we're looking at that, this is why when I worked with patients, couples that were looking to get pregnant, if they have fertility issues or they were just thinking about getting pregnant, sometimes we're like, hey, doc, we're looking to get pregnant. In the next, my mom would be like, we're looking to get pregnant in the next, 4, 6, 8 months. What do you recommend? And the first thing I'd recommend to a mom, like, first, are you looking to have a vaginal birth? Like, that's our goal. Okay, great. Number 2, now you have to find out what's the probiotics in your vaginal canal. And there's testing that you can do so you can know what it is. And then the goal is you want to give yourself 4 to 6 months to balance that out. Now, why am I recommending that? Well, I just shared with you earlier that the first line of your child's bacteria in the gut is going to come when they go through the vaginal canal. They take it in. Now, if they don't, now some people say, well, we didn't have vaginal birth, we had a C-section. Well, then that's the hospital's bacteria. So you understand what's lining it right off the bat. And so this is what's critical about this. You want to make sure we're doing that. So I'm going to read this, make sure I don't mess this up. But there was this research that was done that we're looking at beneficial bacteria, in particular species like the Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. This is like fermented dietary fiber. And these things will produce things like short chain fatty acids. They're called SCFAs. Sorry, I think about that. These are phenomenal. So, and these are the main ones that create things like butyrate, which is phenomenal. You can find butyrate in butter and things like that. Propionate and acetate, very, very critical. Now, butyrate is amazing. I love trying to get butyrate as much as I can. I take things that help me get butyrate into my gut. And one of the big reasons is why I'm a big brain guy. And what I mean by that is I like taking things that help get my brain healthy and keep it sharp and keep it as vibrant as it possibly can. And so butyrate is one of the things that can cross the blood-brain barrier. What it does is it reduces neural inflammation. It supports the integrity of like the blood-brain barrier itself. It helps it get stronger and thicker because then it could not let things get in there. And the kicker, it epigenetically regulates gene expression in neurons. This is huge. It actually influences what genes in the brain cells get turned on and turned off. Now, I can't tell you how powerful that is. So here's a study I wanted to make sure I read. So they did a study at UC Davis, and in several European courts, studies have found correlations between early life microbiome diversity, SCFA production, and cognitive outcomes, right? This includes language development. This includes problem-solving ability and scores on developmental assessments, right? We're not talking about a minor effect. We're talking about a foundational influence just from the butyrate that's being created and so much more. All right. Now I want to take it to the next level, and I want to get into something known as the HPA axis, right? This is emotional regulation because this is what I see every day in clinic. I see kids that are overstimulated, they're having major emotional outbursts. They go from 0 to 100 before you know it. They may get physical. They may get, there's a lot of variables here. And I see a lot of this because that's nervous system dysregulation. And they get more specific. All right. Because from a chiropractic perspective, and I'll get into this again, I see things from a neurological side that I know why it's doing this, but this is what it affects when a kid's nervous system is stuck in stress. And this is known as the HPA axis. Okay. If you've never heard of this before, this is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's our stress response. Okay. This is how our body fires up stress. Right. Now it's a beautiful system. It works wonders when it doesn't get overused. It's one of the laws in the body. What you abuse, you lose, in a sense. So this controls cortisol. Now, cortisol is not a bad thing. A lot of people like to give rap to cortisol, saying, oh, you have too much cortisol. Cortisol is the most potent anti-inflammatory in the world. So it's not a bad thing. But it's not good when it's too much. And this controls our fight or flight mechanisms and how we react. And in infants, this is extremely sensitive to their gut signals. I want you to understand that. Very, very, very sensitive. They did some animal studies in the 2000s, and they since replicated these studies and expanded into human research that showed that germ-free animals, meaning animals raised with no gut microbiome, and I'm reading the report here on this study, had hyperactive HPA axes. Okay, they produce excessive cortisol in the response to stress. They showed anxiety-like behaviors. And critically, the window to correct this was very narrow. I want to emphasize that. Early colonization with healthy microbes could normalize the HPA axis. Late intervention had much less impact. Now, my question is, and I didn't look into this, is what were they doing for intervention? Because I believe there's things you could still do. You can change your gut around. It's always changing. But I believe that in the beginning, it's like anything else. This is going to grow, and it grows quick and fast. And there's ways we can counter that nowadays. But this mapped perfectly what they saw from a clinical perspective. This aligns beautifully with what I see. And I should say beautifully, but it just aligns really well in the sense that we can see this in that realm. That with children who have like dysbiotic gut environments, dysbiotic means just an imbalance of good and bad bacteria and other things, viruses and parasites and all that stuff, because we have all those things in us. Not all of them are bad. When we have these imbalanced microbiomes, what we normally will see and what they saw in the studies too is that it's hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, difficulty with transitions, and sensory sensitivities. These are a lot of kids I see nowadays. And I took 2 years off in practice, and I see this 10 times more than I've seen in my practice before. So we have been calling these behavioral issues, right? But what we should have been asking is what's happening in the gut. It's one of those things that we want to make sure that gut is getting nourished at every step of the way. And I'm going to give you guys all the solutions. I'm going to get into the chiro side too, because chiropractically can help with that too. So the first 1,000 days, I want you to understand this. There's scientists that have something called the first 1,000 days from conception through approximately the second birthday. Is the most critical window for human neurological development, and the microbiome's influence is front and centered in that window. So the mode of delivery at birth, we talked about this, vaginal versus C-section, is one of the most significant determinants of early microbiome composition. Infants, and they've seen the studies on this, infants that are born vaginally are seeded with lactobacillus species from the birth canal. Infants born C-section are, and this is again another study here I'm reading off, instead initially colonized primarily by skin. So when they're a C-section, it's mainly they're getting it from the skin and hospital environments microbes. So a profile that looks very different and has been associated with higher rates of allergies. And I think this is why, because we look at it from, allergies, asthma, obesity, and emerging data suggest differences in cognitive and behavioral outcomes, okay? They're seeing differences in how it affects the brain. So there's that. And we already shared that stuff. And I've seen this quite often in those studies. I also think there's some neurological things that happen too, because with a C-section, the skull doesn't get formed and then create that cranium bloom, which I believe is why you'll see more asthma, breathing, lung stuff related to that also. So I think there's more features in this, but hey, I'm going to stick to what we got here and what research I pulled for this podcast. So breastfeeding though, oh my goodness, breastfeeding is the next major architect. Human breast milk itself contains over 200 distinct oligosaccharides. Okay, these are complex sugars that the infant cannot even digest. They're there specifically though to feed what is known as the Bifidobacterium infantis. It's a keystone species of probiotics that produces protective compounds. It helps train the immune system, so it's building it up. It supports the gut-brain axis. Formula simply cannot replicate this. I'm sorry. They add stuff into it, but breast milk is a whole nother level, which is, this is why I'm very, very big about breastfeeding, duration, being consistent. They see the results. The studies have shown that babies that are breastfed, and we're not even talking about mom's diet, the supplements she's taking and all this stuff. We're just talking about breastfed in general, that it looks at better cognitive and emotional outcomes in the research overall, okay? Emotional and better cognitive functions that come from there. That's why I'm a big fan. Some people say, well, how long should we breastfeed? A year? And I say a year is a minimum. 2 years is a beautiful sweet spot. You got to think about the 1,000 days. You want to make sure you're getting that much breast milk in as much as you can. Okay. And there is also research that shows that an antibiotic exposure. This is a conversation I talk about parents. This is why in my intake form, I ask, did they have any ear infections? Because usually the antibiotics are diagnosed with that. Have they ever been under antibiotics? How many doses have they been on? And I'm looking at what years was that at. My mind, I'm looking at specific reasons for that. And here's why. So antibiotics are sometimes absolutely necessary. I get that. I'm not anti-medicine. I want to be very clear about this. But the research is clear that broad spectrum antibiotic that is used can dramatically reduce microbiome diversity. And then it would happen. The thing about antibiotics is, as you take it, it's not like, oh, I'm off it now, my gut can heal and can come back. No, this stuff persists for months, and sometimes it can take years and even longer. Even with adults, when they go on it, like I'm going on an antibiotic, I'm like, okay, you need to do this, this, and this. Well, doc, you're kind of be a little crazy about that. No, because I know what antibiotics do, and I know how long it takes to recover. I was an antibiotic baby growing up. I had multiple ear infections. I almost died at 4.5 years old with bacterial meningitis. Imagine the antibiotics I had to take there. I had so much antibiotics before the age of 5. I cannot tell you how long it took to heal my gut. I didn't start my journey until I was 1920. I had a severe candida in 1920. Didn't even know that was what it was. And it took years upon years upon years. It was like I correct one thing, there was something else I had to work on. I correct this, then there was something else I had to work on here. And it was just all this stuff. And now at 42, gut has been fully healed. but it has taken so long. I want to tell you, that's the thing about antibiotics. So one of the studies I want to talk about, they looked at a single course of antibiotics in the first 6 months of life was associated with measurable alterations in the gut-brain communication markers. I want to share, and there's a lot of stuff I'm loading here, but I want to share that the typical children that I'm seeing in my office now, just to kind of relate to all this, it's not one specific child. It's because, of course, I always have to protect privacy here, but it's a composite. I see a pattern, and it's time and time again. I see the patterns. I document these patterns, so I know what are the trends that we're seeing, what are the kids that we're commonly seeing with, so that I could see what is the stuff that we're doing, and then we measure these outcomes, so I could see the data of how well we're helping them, and then who had needed implementation of maybe a prebiotic, probiotic, biobiotic, all these different things, and other stuff that we recommend and add into the picture. And, it's one of the things you see this 3-4-year-old child, they're bright, they're excited. You see the clarity in their eyes. Children just have this beautiful light that shines through them because they're pure, they're human. They're the real essence of human, as I always say. But there's a struggle there. And they have these like meltdowns that seem like disproportionate. They're not sleeping well. They have chronic constipation, loose stools. Their immune system's not great. They're being constantly challenged all the time. They may have speech delays, developmental in some way. Maybe they didn't crawl at the time they roughly should have. I know there's new settings for all this stuff, but hey, the rules that we still follow is neurological. And it's like, hey, crawling 8 to 10 months, walking by a year, then there's language milestones that come in there at 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And there's different levels to all this, right? They've been the pediatricians and specialists and sometimes therapists, and everyone's treating one piece of the puzzle in isolation, right? It's all these one little piece here and not looking at the whole thing. No one's having the conversation, hey, how was birth? How was the pregnancy and how was birth? No one's asking about antibiotic history. No one's asking about how's the mom's microbiome during pregnancy. Or even before, right? I told you we do a test to check the vaginal canal to see how the dysbiosis may be down there or not. Vaginal dysbiosis is what it's called if they have it. No one's mapping out the gut-brain axis and saying, hey, what's the nervous system actually receiving from that enteric environment? Okay, that's what we do differently. When I look at a child, I'm looking at every single facet of it. We're looking at the whole system. I'm looking to say, okay, how well is their primitive reflexes going along? Because that'll tell me if brain was actually is in a sync and developing the way it's supposed to. Because an unintegrated, or what we call retained primitive reflexes, that's a sign of a nervous system that has not developed through its proper sequence. It tells me there's things that are going on. I look at cranial mechanisms, right? Because the birthing process plays enormous stress on the cranium and the brainstem. I look at the vagal tone, and because low vagal tone, which is majority of what I see, plays a huge role in the gut-brain highway. Okay, it described earlier when it's underperforming. And I also look at the gut and everything that's connected. The nervous system doesn't just stop at the skull. It's all the way down to the microbiome and more. And so when you're addressing all of it, the structural, the neurological, the nutritional, the microbiome, this is when you see children really transform. And it's really, really powerful because like even for me as a chiropractor, when I'm looking at things, my first thing is I always go nervous system first. And that's the approach. So let's look at really quick how this kind of plays a role in the autonomic dysregulation. The autonomic nervous system, that's the parasympathetic and sympathetic, or I call the sympathetic is the gas pedal, parasympathetic is the brake pedal. Kind of slows things down. Gas pedal revs things up. Okay. The more we hit gas pedal, the more we do create an imbalance in the gut too, because stress affects the gut. If the nervous system stuck in stress, we're going to create more dysbiosis in that gut, and we're going to be feeding things in the gut and weakening the gut, and there's a whole plethora of stuff that happens just with that. So I want you to actually see what this looks like though in the babies. What you normally are going to see is the most common thing we see is like excessive crying or colic that doesn't resolve. Difficulty breastfeeding or taking a bottle due to oral motor tension. So a lot of times people are going to, first thing you want to do is baby has oral motor tension, or maybe they have ties, maybe lip and tongue tie. We got to take care of. Okay. I'm not saying that's not the cause. It's an organic issue that's probably adding to all this, but there are cranial and neurological stuff that is affecting these things. The nerves actually control the tongue. The nerves actually control the certain reflexes. We need to look at that first, address those things. Constipation or greeny, like mucousy, like type stools, indicating there's gut inflammation in some way, shape, or form. You get poor sleep consolidation, meaning the baby cannot stay in sleep cycles, right? They got hypertonicity or hypotonicity. of the body, and specifically possibly the neck, usually leaning to one side or the other. Excessive startle response, difficulty in being put down and calmed. Okay. These are just not normal baby things and not things you want to wait out. They don't grow out of these things. These are the nervous system telling you it needs support. And the microbiome and the vagal nerve, the vagal tone are usually the signs of that. Okay. So I want to get into really quick. I wrote some stuff down here, and I want to get really quick into you're not helpless. You have there's things that you can do. All right. First, let's bring the science. Let's bring all of the science home in a way that that will actually help you, because knowledge without action, it's just anxiety, really. It doesn't do anything. And I don't want to leave you anxious. I want you to leave someone empowered in this episode. So here's what I want you to take from this episode. Whether you have a newborn at home, a toddler, whether you're pregnant right now, think about having a family, or you have kids that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, teenagers now. Either way, all these pillars can be optimized. I said there's nothing stuck, okay? It's just because maybe you didn't do the first 1,000 days, that's okay. You can still change things over time. If it wasn't true, my gut would never have healed itself. So there are small, consistent actions that I recommend doing that you can help. If you are pregnant, know that your microbiome was transferred to your baby. Prioritizing probiotic-rich foods such as fermented vegetables, kefir, yogurt, kimchi, those kind of things. And you want to do prebiotic fibers during pregnancy. One of the most powerful gifts that you can give your child before they're born. I would recommend you would want to be taking specific types of probiotics to help with you. I like soil-based, to be honest. They're the best. That gets through the gut. They get into the colon. They adhere to it. Those are the ones I take. Those are the ones I recommend. I've been recommending for 15 years. They're phenomenal. They do wonders. You want to make sure you're taking a really good prebiotic, something that only feeds the good bacteria. If you have questions on these, you can always email us. We can give you recommendations on the specific products that we take when it comes to that. If you've had a C-section, no, this is not a life section. It's not a life sentence. It's for your child. There's a lot of things we can do, because even from a cranial perspective, there's things that we can do. It doesn't mimic doesn't replace anything from a vaginal birth, but we can get as close as we can when we do cranial work like that. But there's research on vaginal seeding. Okay, you basically introduce vaginal flora to the newborn skin and mouth after a C-section birth. There's things you can do. You can discuss this with your midwife or OB. Beyond that, like I said, probiotic supplementation for the infant is critical. You want to get strains like this, okay? So Lactobacillus rhamnosus, GG. You want to get Bifidobacterium bacterium impetus. Those are the two that are meaningfully supportive. You put them in a powder. If you're breastfeeding, you can put some if you can express it into a bottle, you can mix that up in there and give that to them. You can do it that way. That's one way you can do it. If you're doing formula fed, you can put that in there. I would recommend. But if you're breastfeeding, keep going as long as you can. Make sure as mom, you're taking in the good probiotics still through that, because they do go through the breast milk. Even if you did 3 months or 6 weeks, even that, it's still something. So I want you to understand, it's still something. Okay. I shared with you what's the most optimal that I recommend, but whatever you can do, whatever you have done, great when it comes to that. Next, you want to be thoughtful by antibiotic use. You want to minimize the antibiotics as much as you can. I know if they're a necessity, do that. There are other things you can do naturally, but you want to make sure that you are minimizing and using the minimal that you can as possible. This is the third thing I'm going to recommend is chiropractic care. This is my world. This is what I do. And what I've noticed is, like I said, I don't do a lot of I work with the microbiome. We do things like that. But what I'll do is we do nervous system first, because I want to see if the vagus nerve, correcting it, getting the nervous system up and running, taking the stress response down, regulating the gas pedal, brake pedal systems, and all those different stuff. When we see this happen, usually it takes care of the stuff too. It will help. And if it doesn't, then we go to next level. You see, everything's layers. And that's kind of how I do things when I'm looking at it. But you want to make sure they have adequate tone, which means they're well regulated when it comes to this. So specific chiropractic care, definitely a chiropractic care when we're looking at the craniums. It's very, very important. This is not craniosacral therapy. It's something different, but craniosacral therapy I am a huge, huge fan of. So I want you to understand that. It's also looking at the neural stuff to make sure their brain is developing the way it's supposed to. Primitive postural reflexes, these things that we look at. We look at different things that what we have to add to help in that perspective. Because if these things are still on, it's putting your child's nervous system in a hyperactive stress state. There is massive stress in that nervous system firing in the background. Okay. And when we can resolve these reflexes over time, this takes that nervous system stress out. It takes them out of that emergency mode and allows them to finally develop more properly like they were designed to. Okay. This is critical. And these are the things that I look at a chiropractor. Again, I'm neuro-focused. I look at all the neurology that I possibly can to help your child develop as best they possibly can. And then we look at things of what we can do to help in them to develop even higher levels and so much more. The last thing that I'm going to recommend is going to be infant gut is not just where food goes, okay? This is a neurological organ. So what you feed is literally shapes the brain. So as you use solid foods, typically around 6 months, diversity is everything. You want to expose the microbiome to as much food as you possibly can, different plant fibers, fermented foods, age appropriate, and obviously minimize. A program that I love that I follow for my own kids and I recommend like crazy is Solid Starts. They make it simple, they make it easy, they have images, and they can help your child, get exposed to the 100 foods in the first 6 months of eating solids. Another thing that's huge is like omega-3s. Mom, if you're breastfeeding, you can take the omega-3s. If not, omega-3s is something I highly recommend. DHA is structurally essential for brain development, and it also supports the integrity of the gut lining. That's a whole nother conversation about gut lining, because when it's intact and healthy, the gut-brain signals work a lot cleaner and they're a lot clearer. When it's compromised, research called this intestinal permeability, which just means that it's leaky gut, in other words, and these let things get into the system that shouldn't be there, and so much more. So these are a lot. I know I'm loading a lot here, but I want you to know there's things that you can do. Chiropractic care is the first and the foremost. Getting good probiotics built into the nervous system, looking at getting good fats into the body, especially for mom. If you're breastfeeding, that's great. If not, if your kids are older, then you want to make sure you're getting this in as much as you possibly can. If you're pregnant, you got a lot of time to start planning now. Before we close, I want to give you a quick reference science summary, because I believe informed parents are the most powerful advocates for their children. The gut-brain axis is bidirectional communication between the enteric nervous system and your central nervous system. It's mediated primarily through the vagus nerve, immune signals, and microbiome metabolites. The microbiome in the first 1,000 days is the primary programmer for the HPA axis, the body stress response. And dysbiosis in this window has been associated with increased anxiety, emotional dysregulation, and cognitive differences. Short chain fatty acids, SCFAs, they're produced by beneficial gut bacteria. This crosses the blood-brain barrier. Neuroinflammation decreases a lot. It helps with epigenetic expression of the brain. They're literally writing the instructions to the brain cells. 90 to 95% of serotonin, the feel-good hormone, is built and developed in the gut. Dopamine's another one. So you want to make sure that we're getting that gut to be focusing and expressing healthy as possible. Mode of delivery, okay? Breastfeeding, phenomenal. Early antibiotic exposure are the three biggest modifiable factors that in early microbiome development. As a chiropractor addressing neuro-focused stuff, addressing the vagus nerve, the tone of the nervous system, and the tone of that the vagal tone itself, cranial mechanisms and primary reflexes are critical. So here's what I want you to do to walk away knowing today. Your brain is being built right now. Not in the classroom, not 10 years from now, it's right now. In the microbiome ecosystem of their gut is signaling traveling up and down that vagus nerve and communicating all throughout that process. Every nap, every feeding, every interaction is doing that. Decisions you make in this window, the foods, the care, the providers, the awareness of the gut, the support of your child's nervous system, they are not small decisions. This is long-term, massive investments for your child's health. It's the most complex structures known in the human universe, known as the human brain. This is what's helping them to thrive and change and so forth. So the most important thing I want to leave with you is this. It's never too late to start supporting the nervous system. It's never too late to start supporting this gut. The brain is plastic. It's always changing. The microbiome is also shifted and it can change also. So the nervous system is the biggest thing to regulate first. This is what I see in kids all the time. You want to address this first. It starts the healing process. It helps heal, takes the stress off. It's the biggest component to that, because when we see gut stuff, the nervous system is always involved first and leads that way. If this sparks something in you, if you are sitting there thinking, I want someone to look at my child through this lens, reach out. This is exactly what I do. If you're not in the Knoxville area, in the Maryville area, or in Morristown area, reach out to us. We have a connection of people that we can get you to. And if your parent, like I said, who needs to know this, hear this today, a new mom, a parent who's struggling with their toddler's meltdowns, someone navigating the child with developmental challenges, things like that, share the episode. Text this link over to them. And you might be the reason they finally find the right answers. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring this deeply about the next generation. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.